what is a chaplain doing talking to operators and techs about ethical decision making when you could say, chaps, Kristian, your hands are lily white? Well, first I'd like to say to that, my hands aren't lily white, because I believe everybody's got a heart that's got messed up stuff. Secondly, I wouldn't be serving in the military if I didn't want the rule of law, if I didn't want us to bend the political will of our nation for the betterment of my family, of our country, but hopefully the world, and to do the right thing. And sometimes that involves warfare that is just war. And so during the deployment, I took gratitude to God that we were able to target individuals that had stepped up against that rule of law and to say, hey, the buck stops here. And I was glad on my 2015 deployment on my cruiser that carrier strike group dropped 500,000 pounds of ordnance, and I believed I was playing a role as a staff advisor to the commander and as a chaplain and friend to the team that was helping them get the job done. So I don't think it is true that my hands are clean in that sense. I need God's grace too. But I will agree and say this: it is a little bit of shaky ground for the chaplain to come when I did not have to be standing in an alleyway or stand from a sniper position or lean forward prone and make a call about whether or not I have to take out a kid that has an explosive. And that kind of hurts me to think about myself somehow being the SME when some of you, my friends, will face or have faced situations that you're like, you can't understand maybe what that cost me in here. So I just want to say thank you for the privilege of talking. All that being said, I think I have a couple things to download to you that can help you. The first is that there is an impact, and our commander talked about this with me at the command team recently. Studies are showing that there are impacts that are more than we even thought on the inner person from conducting warfare. And some would call it moral injury, some would call it variations of that and post-traumatic stress. But the bottom line is that our sense of ourself, our connection to others can get worn down, and I think some of it is our give a crap when it comes to doing what would be the right thing gets worn down. It's like you hear your mom kiss you on the cheek, and when you're in high school, hey, go do the right thing, have a fun night, honey. And you hear and you're like, okay. But at the same time, it's like it's a lot harder when you actually get in that situation to know what the right thing is. So as we talk about ethics today, my mission was, hey chaps, will you tell us what ethics means to our operating team, techs and operators? And so I would say that we have an uncompromising commitment to integrity and character development, and you all know that. That's what this whole thing's all about. We'd rather have high character people with mid-level competency or lower that we bring up than bring in people with high competency that don't see, black and white, that there can be a right and wrong. Another complicating factor is that a lot of times the toughest calls we have to make are not black and white, right versus wrong. They're like best versus good versus okay versus bad. And it takes somebody that's a thinking person that has what you could call a conscience, a spiritual dynamic, or a greater sense of humanity to say, I've got to do the best thing. And when we were at the Keating Ranch, one of our senior leaders told me, Kristian, part of special warfare is that if we could just take 5 people to go to the beach and take a beach of a competitor nation that we have to go into conflict with, who out of 330 million people would we choose? That's what special warfare is about. And I would put to us, that's what ethics is about too. If we have to make really, really tough calls, and I think they're incredibly tough calls, are you personally ready to be that person that says, I want to be the one that has their hand raised to make those calls? And it happens on a micro decision basis. I think it happens when I choose to get up and help my son with his potty training instead of just pushing it to my wife. I think it happens if I say, I just need a little more time for self-care instead of getting off my butt and doing dishes. I think it happens when I'm driving on the road and how I treat people. I think it happens in the humor I have. It's great to laugh, but if the things that I don't treat as unique or holy, if that stuff always is just being messed around with, I can start to dim in my view. And so I'm not trying to be Mr. Wordy here. In fact, I apologize for the many words. I'm proud to serve on this team. I want us to recognize there's impacts to the kind of warfare we do and the work that we're in. And I want to help protect you all. Right now, we can start sharpening our edge. I'm stoked about the people that are going to come and take the bulk of the brief today, because they're going to talk about real scenarios for you to start spinning your head around. Every community is different. The supply corps is different. What matters to somebody that's a surface warfare officer or aviation or our community, it all differs, not in if right and wrong exist from my perspective, but in the things that sometimes we focus on. And so everybody's got something to bring to bear. I talked to Captain Chuck Hayes, and he talked about Veneer Man. It's like this dude that has to submerge below the surface and do barbaric deeds on behalf of his family and his nation, but then he has to come back up and walk his kid down the street and eat lunch. How do you do that? And I'll close with saying, my brother Nels, an Army chaplain, recently commissioned. My dad, a retired chaplain, but Nels told me, he said, you know what, Kristian? One of the ways I think somebody could do that is they can actually be saying a prayer while they're pulling a trigger. You know, not just that it flies true and takes out the target, but that the spiritual thing that's happening with a life being taken will be the right thing, that God would, in a sense, bless that person who's doing their best, and that they'd be coming from the right ethic, the right heart. And I think that is what separates us from our enemy, and it's what helps us have that clear conscience. I got a buddy that he's coming off of life support today because he retired last year, and events happened in his life in such a way that over 15 months his decline was so severe that his body is failing him. That hurts me to bring up, but I share it because there are impacts to our inner person that we're not necessarily thinking about when we're just in ULT or we're just on one pump or two pumps. But slowly that give a crap is getting worn down if we're not careful, and then all of a sudden we're not either proud of who we are or we're exhausted and we don't have more for the finish line of life. Love you guys. That's what I got. Thanks for listening. This is Kristian, the Little Ethical Chat out.